The night was cold, the kind that sent a chill deep into your bones. The streets were empty, bathed in the dim glow of flickering streetlights. Not a single car passed. Not a single voice echoed. Just silence, and something else. Detective Ryan Carter walked briskly, his boots tapping against the pavement. His breath formed small clouds in the cold air. But something felt off. He could feel it, eyes on him. He glanced over his shoulder. Nothing. Just shadows stretching across the sidewalk. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Then, a sound, a soft rustling behind him. Ryan's instincts kicked in. His hand hovered near his holster. He turned sharply, scanning the street. Still nothing. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe he was overthinking. But deep down, he knew he wasn't alone. And in just a few minutes, his life would depend on the only partner he had left, his K9. Detective Ryan Carter wasn't the kind of man who got scared easily. 15 years on the force had hardened him. He had faced armed criminals, stood in the middle of violent riots, and walked through crime scenes that would haunt most people for a lifetime. But this was different. Ryan didn't believe in ghosts. He trusted logic, evidence, and facts. Fear was just another emotion, one he had learned to control. But tonight, standing alone on that deserted street, he felt something he couldn't explain. His heartbeat was steady, but his instincts were screaming. He had been trained to trust them. Something wasn't right. Ryan had always been cautious. That's what kept him alive in this job. He never took unnecessary risks. He never ignored a gut feeling. And right now, that feeling was telling him to be ready. The problem? There was no one around. No threats. No visible danger. Just the eerie silence and the unsettling sense that someone was watching him. He took a deep breath and kept moving, his K9 partner, Shadow, trotting beside him. The dog was trained to sense danger before it arrived. If there was something out there, Shadow would react. But Shadow wasn't growling. He was silent, ears perked up, as if listening. And that's when Ryan knew, whatever was watching him wasn't human. Ryan's heart skipped a beat as the sound reached his ears. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Close. He stopped in his tracks, turning sharply to scan the area. But there was no one. Just the empty street, the shadows stretching across the sidewalk like dark fingers reaching for him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was right behind him. Just your mind playing tricks, he muttered to himself, but it didn't help. Shadow, his K9 partner, stopped beside a parked car. The dog's ears were erect, his body tense. Then, without warning, Shadow darted behind the car. Ryan's hand instinctively went to his holster. His pulse quickened. There was something back there. He could feel it. Shadow? Ryan called softly, his voice betraying the unease creeping up his spine. The dog didn't respond. Ryan stepped closer, his eyes never leaving the car. His body felt heavy, like it was being pulled into the shadows. Suddenly, a whisper, barely audible, brushed against his ear. Leave while you still can. Ryan froze. His blood ran cold. His eyes shot to the car, scanning every corner. But there was nothing, no figure, no sign of movement. His heart pounded in his chest. Who said that? He spun around, his body tense, ready for whatever was coming. But the street remained silent. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves, but that was all. He wasn't imagining it. The voice had been real. And it wasn't the first time tonight that he had felt something strange, something unnatural. Ryan's instincts screamed at him to leave, but his training kept him on edge. He couldn't just run, not without understanding what was happening. But deep down, he knew he wasn't in control anymore. Ryan's feet moved faster, his breath quickening as he made his way home. He kept his eyes trained on the shadows around him, half expecting something, or someone, to jump out at him. He fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking more than he cared to admit. This wasn't normal. His training told him to stay calm, but the unease in his gut was growing by the second. The apartment door creaked as he unlocked it, the familiar sound of the lock giving way to the feeling of safety. Or at least, that's what he thought. The moment Ryan stepped inside, a chill wrapped around him. It wasn't the cold night air, it was something else. Something wrong. He slammed the door behind him and locked it with a sense of urgency. But the moment he turned around, a cold rush of dread settled over him. In the dim light of his living room, there was a figure standing near the corner. A tall, dark shape, nearly blending with the shadows. Ryan's blood turned to ice. He took a step forward, his mind racing. Had someone broken into his apartment? Had he missed a sign? His hand went instinctively to his sidearm. But before he could react, the figure moved, a slow, deliberate step forward. Ryan's body stiffened, and for the first time in years, he felt completely helpless. The room felt colder, almost like the air had thickened, and every inch of his skin prickled with the feeling of being watched. This wasn't a break-in. This was something far worse. Ryan's heart raced as he stared at the figure in the corner of his living room. The air was thick with tension, the silence between them unbearable. "Who are you?" Ryan demanded, his voice steady but laced with unease. "What do you want from me?" The figure didn't answer. It simply stood there, its shape shifting slightly in the dim light. But Ryan couldn't look away from its eyes. They were hollow, like two black voids where life once existed but had long since faded. His breath caught in his throat. Those eyes were not human, nothing about this figure was. "You were warned," the figure whispered, its voice a raspy hiss that seemed to echo in the room. "But you didn't listen." Ryan's chest tightened, his instinct screaming at him to run. But he couldn't. He wouldn't. He slowly reached for his weapon, his hand trembling, but as his fingers brushed the cold metal of his gun, an invisible force slammed into him. A pressure, heavy, suffocating, wrapped around his throat. He gasped, clawing at his neck, but there was nothing to grab. It felt like the air itself was strangling him, pulling the life from his body. The lights overhead flickered wildly. His vision blurred, his surroundings spinning as darkness crept into the edges of his sight. Ryan's legs buckled beneath him, and he fell to the floor, his body failing him. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't fight it. The last thing he saw was the figure moving closer, those empty eyes locking onto his soul. And then, nothing. The next morning, the apartment was eerily silent. Ryan Carter was gone. The door was locked from the inside, the same way it had been when he entered. No signs of struggle. No evidence of what had happened. Neighbors reported nothing. No screams. No noise. No sign of a fight. Just the calm, stillness of the night, and then, in the morning, the absence of Ryan. His apartment stood untouched, like time itself had stopped. The police arrived to find the door sealed tight. They searched every inch, but there was nothing to explain the disappearance of a man who had walked through that door only hours before. No one could understand it. No one could explain it. Ryan Carter was gone. And in the quiet, empty apartment, the only thing left was the strange, lingering chill in the air, like something unnatural had happened, and no one would ever have the answers. Days passed, but the strange events surrounding Ryan's disappearance didn't fade. In fact, they only grew more unsettling. People walking past his apartment noticed something off, something that made their skin crawl. The air felt heavier near his door, as if something was waiting just out of sight. Some claimed they heard whispers late at night, faint voices carried by the wind, barely audible but unmistakable. "You were warned." The words seemed to drift from nowhere, like a voice hidden in the shadows, speaking directly into the hearts of those who walked too close to that cursed apartment. At first, it was just rumors. People dismissed it as paranoia or imagination. But over time, more and more reported hearing the same chilling whisper. Some swore they could hear it even on the quietest of nights. Others spoke of a cold chill that would grip their hearts when they passed by the building. No one could explain it, and no one wanted to. The whispers never stopped. The mystery deepened, and with every passing night, the unanswered questions grew louder. What really happened to Detective Ryan Carter? Had he been taken by something supernatural, or was there something darker at play? The fear in the air was palpable, and it felt like the answers were just beyond reach. But no one could uncover the truth, at least, not yet. As the whispers continued, the mysteries surrounding Ryan's disappearance only seemed to grow. But one thing became clear: this wasn't a ghost story. The figure in Ryan's apartment wasn't just a spirit, and it wasn't out to haunt him. It had a deeper purpose, a message that Ryan, unfortunately, had failed to understand in time. Ryan had been targeted. Not by some otherworldly force, but by someone and something much more real. But why? The answer lay in the case Ryan had been working on. Months before his disappearance, Ryan had been investigating a string of corrupt activities within the police department. He'd been digging deep into a network of powerful individuals involved in shady deals, cover-ups, and crimes too dark for the public eye. He'd been close to exposing it all. But some people didn't want the truth to come out, and they knew exactly how to silence him. The figure he encountered in his apartment wasn't a random specter. It was a warning from those who had already dealt with him once before. They were sending a message. A clear warning. Stop digging. Or else. Ryan hadn't listened. He'd pushed forward, determined to bring the truth to light. But now, he paid the price. The shadows weren't just haunting his apartment. They were a sign of the dangerous forces that had been watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, Ryan Carter was gone, vanished without a trace. But the mystery was far from over. The shadowy figures were still out there, waiting for the next move. As the mystery unfolded, one chilling truth became clear: this wasn't just about a missing detective or a haunting figure in the shadows. This was about something far deeper. Racism, in every form, lurks in places most people never see. It hides in the dark corners of society, where people's voices are silenced and their actions are judged before they even have the chance to fight back. Ryan Carter, a man who stood for justice, had become a target. Not just because of his dedication, but because of his willingness to expose the wrongs that others wanted to keep buried. Some didn't want him to succeed. They didn't want his voice to be heard, his findings to be revealed. So, they made sure to create fear, to make it clear that speaking out against the system would come with dangerous consequences. But the lesson here is clear. Fear is created to silence those who fight for what's right. Fear is used to control and keep people in line. Ryan's story shows us just how far some will go to protect their secrets. It shows us that the fight against racism, against injustice, is real, and it's something that must end. Ryan paid a price for standing up for what was right. But his courage is a reminder that we all have a role to play in this fight. And we must continue to stand for justice, no matter the cost. Racism has no place in this world, whether it's in the shadows or out in the open. And it's time we all take a stand to ensure it ends. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think really happened to Ryan? Was it a haunting, or was it something more? What do you believe? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in equality, if you stand against racism and injustice, share this story. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's spread the message far and wide. Together, we can shine a light on what's hidden in the shadows. We can fight back against fear and create a world where justice truly prevails. Don't let Ryan's story be forgotten. Share it with your friends and family, and keep the fight for equality alive. The time to stand up is now.